Rachel Moore's phone still had a signal when she vanished in the mountain town of Lander, Wyoming, population 7,546. The first Friday of summer arrived with stifling heat, blanketing the Popo Agie Valley. At 3:52 p.m., a customer in a convenience store on Main Street recalled seeing Rachel, the 17-year-old high school student, stepping out with a cold bottle of water in hand. She had just bought it after school ended, waving to a classmate at the door. The customer still remembered Rachel in her thin white jacket, hair tied high, her figure fading north down the quiet street. What happened in the hours that followed would haunt Lander for over a decade. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On June 15, 2007, a sweltering Friday afternoon enveloped the small town of Lander, Wyoming, where quiet streets sat nestled in a valley framed by rugged mountains. The summer sun scorched the pavement, making the town's air feel slow and heavy. Main Street was nearly deserted, with only a few old pickup trucks passing by, dust mixing with the scent of dry grass from nearby fields. Small shops with faded awnings stayed open but saw few customers. A handful of locals sipped iced drinks on porches to beat the heat. At 3:45 p.m., the high school dismissal bell rang, and students spilled out, laughter echoing across the parking lot. Rachel Moore, 17, tall and lanky with brown hair tied back, appeared among her friends. She carried a worn canvas backpack, walking casually as always, no one suspecting it would be the last time she was seen. Rachel said goodbye to her friends, mentioning she'd walk home via the usual route through Main Street. On the way, she stopped at the convenience store on the corner, where the air conditioner hummed over an old radio. The familiar cashier recalled Rachel heading straight to the drink cooler, grabbing a cold bottle of water, and chatting briefly with a classmate. They shared a quiet laugh before Rachel stepped outside. Another customer, waiting to pay, later said the last image he saw was Rachel pushing open the glass door. Stepping into the afternoon sunlight, her face tilted down at her phone screen. She tapped a few buttons while walking out onto the quiet side street. That was the final detail anyone recalled about Rachel. The door closed behind her, and her slender figure vanished into the glaring light. From that moment, no one saw her again. As afternoon turned to evening, anxiety replaced routine in the Moore family's small home. Rachel's mother called her phone repeatedly, hearing only unanswered rings. Her father drove around town, checking friends' houses and asking neighbors, but everyone shook their heads. As the sun set, streetlights flickered on, casting an eerie calm over the town. The house on Lander's outskirts filled with tension, the silence broken only by the heavy ticking of a clock. Near midnight, with faint hopes that Rachel had just gone somewhere and would return fading. Her parents reluctantly called the police, their voices trembling as they reported their daughter missing without a trace. The phone at Lander Police Department rang, and the on-duty sergeant quickly logged the details, escalating it to an urgent report. By dawn, a missing person file was officially opened, and the police chief rallied all personnel, planning a search from the small office on Main Street. Topographic maps spread across a table, with red markers noting the high school, convenience store, and neighborhoods on the town's edge. The Moore family sat quietly in a corner, faces haggard after a sleepless night, red-rimmed eyes fixed on the police notes, searching for a glimmer of hope. Word spread fast, rousing the town. Before sunrise, groups of residents with flashlights, sticks, and ATVs gathered at the police station parking lot to join the search. Police coordinated with local rescue teams, and scent dogs were brought in, sniffing a shirt Rachel's mother provided. That familiar scent became the anchor for dozens of eyes, scanning for the smallest clue. Teams fanned out, scouring roads, ditches, and vacant lots along Highway 287, calling Rachel's name in faint hope of a response. Hundreds of footsteps trampled dewy grass, leaving chaotic trails in Wyoming's usually tranquil landscape, rarely witnessed to such a massive effort. A Wyoming Highway Patrol helicopter was deployed, circling above, its spotlight sweeping fields and brush, creating an urgent scene unprecedented in Lander. On the ground, pickup trucks blared sirens, clearing paths for searchers spreading out. Police knocked on doors, asking residents if they'd seen Rachel after 4 p.m. that day. A few vague tips surfaced. Someone claimed to have seen her crossing a wooden bridge near the park. Another mentioned glimpsing a white jacket by the road, but all were hazy, lacking solid evidence. Hours passed, sweat-soaked volunteers' shirts. Voices grew hoarse from shouting, yet no clear trace emerged. Then, a man stooped beside a shallow ditch, his eyes catching something, a waterlogged, mud-caked green backpack tangled in weeds. Hearts stopped, and within minutes, the area around the ditch was cordoned off. The backpack was carefully placed in an evidence bag, sealed in front of witnesses. At the station, the Moore family instantly recognized it as Rachel's, still holding her school books, a notebook filled with scribbled notes, and some supplies. It ruled out the initial theory that Rachel had run away, suggesting the abandoned backpack was an ominous sign. Forensics scoured the area, finding faint shoe prints in wet soil, a scrap of fabric caught in grass, and a long drag mark, as if something heavy had been pulled. Everything was photographed, marked, and collected with strict protocol. Yet beyond the backpack, nothing clearly pointed to Rachel's whereabouts. As dusk fell, the search expanded into the Popo Agie forest. Dark trails swallowed flashlight beams, dogs' barks mixed with radio chatter, creating a suffocating tension. Volunteers paused, listening for any sound through the wind-rustling leaves, hoping for a sign from the missing girl. But as night enveloped the forest and exhausted searchers turned back, the effort fell into a terrifying void. Rachel remained missing. The next morning, dawn's light only deepened the town's gloom. The Lander Police Department became a hub of chaos, with residents bringing tips, rumors, and unverified leads. The green backpack found near the ditch, the only tangible link to Rachel, now posed a haunting question: who left it there, and why? To fill the gaps, police shifted to reviewing witness statements, focusing on the afternoon of June 15th, the last moments Rachel was seen. The first startling account came from a middle-aged woman living near the Texaco gas station on Main Street. She said around 4:15 p.m. While watering plants on her porch, she glimpsed Rachel standing by the station's outdoor vending machine. Beside her was an older man with graying hair, wearing a long-sleeved shirt. They seemed to be talking, with Rachel stepping back slightly, her expression uneasy. It felt odd because they didn't seem to know each other, she recalled slowly, signing her statement. The detail was logged, but when pressed, she admitted she only saw them for a few seconds, didn't hear their words, and wasn't sure where the man went after. Meanwhile, the digital forensics team pulled footage from the convenience store where Rachel bought her water. The June 15th recording played on a grainy screen in the briefing room. Despite poor timing and angles, they reviewed each frame. Rachel appeared at 3:52 p.m., exiting the glass door with her water and phone, matching the witness's account. But the footage revealed another detail. About a minute after Rachel left, headlights from a dark pickup truck flashed across the street. The truck lingered briefly, tilted, then drove off. Its license plate was unreadable due to glare. This sparked debate in the room. Could the truck be linked to the man at the gas station, or was it just passing by? Things grew murkier with another statement from a high school classmate. He insisted he saw Rachel walking alone northbound near an intersection toward the highway. "I'm sure it was Rachel. I called her name. But she didn't turn," he said confidently. Yet his timing, around 4:30 p.m., clashed with the woman's account at the gas station. If Rachel was talking to a man at 4:15, could she have been alone elsewhere just 15 minutes later, or had a witness mistaken the time? Police began to see a web of inconsistencies, each piece distorted, refusing to form a clear picture. To verify, investigators returned to the Texaco station, pulling its security footage. Unfortunately, the old system offered blurry images, capturing only the cashier counter, not the outdoor area, where the woman claimed to have seen Rachel. Leads hit a dead end. Police questioned drivers who'd parked there that afternoon, but none confirmed seeing Rachel. The dark pickup truck yielded no solid results either. In a small town like Lander, dozens of similar trucks were common. By day's end, after cross-referencing statements, police built a rough timeline. 3:45 p.m. Rachel left school. 3:52. She appeared on the store's camera. Around 4:15, a witness saw her at the gas station with an unknown man. Around 4:30, a student claimed she was walking north. Then, nothing. The window between 4:30 and 5 p.m., when she should have reached home, was a gaping void. The evidence only fueled suspicion, not certainty. Each statement, each video clip, was a shard of a broken mirror, reflecting fragments of truth, but not a whole picture. In the police station, the timeline was pinned to a whiteboard, red markers noting each point, a large question mark looming. Investigators stared silently at the gap from 4:30 p.m. onward. One murmured, "If we can't fill this gap, we'll never find Rachel." The room grew heavy. The Moore family, hearing the briefing, clung to each other, their desperate eyes fixed on the blank space on the board, the window that might have sealed their daughter's fate. With the gap timeline set, Lander police knew they couldn't rely solely on witnesses or grainy footage. The next step was digging into Rachel's connections, scrutinizing every relationship and individual potentially linked to her disappearance. The initial list included her boyfriend, close friends, teachers she interacted with, and neighbors around the Moore home. The small interrogation room on the police station's second floor stayed lit, pens scratching and recorders running non-stop. The first person called in was Rachel's boyfriend, a fellow high school student with long hair, often seen with her after school. He sat across from the investigator, hands clasped tightly, trying to stay calm. When asked about the afternoon of June 15th, he stated that after school, he stayed at the gym with friends preparing for a basketball game. Police quickly verified this, and footage from the school's gym camera showed him there from 4 p.m. until nearly 6 p.m. Perfectly matching his account, with a solid alibi, he was cleared as a suspect, though advised to stay in touch if he recalled any further details. Next were Rachel's close friends. One girl mentioned that Rachel had vaguely talked about wanting to avoid some people, but didn't specify who. This made investigators sit up, but upon digging deeper, it turned out Rachel was referring to a former classmate who had mocked her on social media. The other friends all confirmed they left school that afternoon by bus, corroborated by multiple witnesses, aligning their statements with reality. A bigger suspicion arose when police focused on a high school teacher who had been reported by female students for unsettling behavior, leering glances, and inappropriate comments. His name had caused unease among parents, whispered about at PTA meetings. Investigators summoned him for questioning. The middle-aged man arrived looking nervous, his eyes evasive. Under intense questioning, he stammered that he hadn't seen Rachel that afternoon. His shaky initial statement heightened suspicion, but within 24 hours, footage from a hardware store in Riverton, where he was shopping at the exact time of Rachel's disappearance, was provided. Receipts, camera footage, and a store witness confirmed his presence there from 4 to 5 p.m. Despite his tarnished reputation, police had to rule him out as a suspect. Though public unease lingered, neighbors around the Moore home were also questioned. An elderly couple said they were in Cody, visiting their son that afternoon, backed by restaurant receipts. A young man living 2 houses down was confirmed to be working the evening shift at a gas station, supported by co-workers and shift footage. These accounts were swiftly verified, and each person was gradually eliminated. When the interrogations ended, the whiteboard in the briefing room was updated. Names initially circled in red were crossed out as alibis were confirmed. The timeline's empty gaps remained, but the suspect list thinned to nearly nothing, leaving no one to grasp onto. Investigators sat silently before the timeline, the threads connecting convenience store, gas station, north intersection, still just big question marks. Despite hours of questioning and verification, they couldn't find a trace of anyone with motive or opportunity to make Rachel disappear. As night fell, with the neon hall lights casting shadows into the now empty interrogation room, a sense of deadlock settled in. Everyone close to Rachel, boyfriend, friends, teacher, neighbors, had clear alibis. Suspicions that flared up were quickly extinguished. The investigation was back at square one, with no specific suspect in sight. The small town silence only made the void named Rachel feel colder, bleaker. After days of relentless questioning without identifying a clear suspect, pressure shifted back to the Lander Police Department's forensics team. If the people around Rachel all had alibis, the only remaining clues were at the scene. On June 20th, the ditch where Rachel's backpack was found was cordoned off again. This time, not for a visual search, but for forensic experts to scrutinize every detail. A large white tarp was set up to shield the area, with cameras, rulers, and markers appearing on the damp ground. The steady click of photos echoed as each trace was documented from multiple angles. Near the muddy edge, an investigator crouched, pointing to a shimmering mark on the ground. It was a tire track, shallow but distinct due to the soft soil from rain 2 days earlier. They photographed it, then poured plaster directly into the mark, preserving it for the lab. A quick on-site comparison revealed the tread pattern matched a Firestone tire, commonly used on 2005 model pickup trucks. This was immediately noted as evidence the perpetrator likely used a pickup, vaguely matching the dark truck seen fleetingly on the convenience store camera. The backpack was re-examined. Its muddy fabric was analyzed under UV light in a mobile lab, revealing dark fibers clinging to the straps, distinct from Rachel's jacket and jeans. The tiny fibers were collected with sterile tweezers, sealed in a small nylon bag. Another discovery stunned the team: a short, dark brown hair caught in the zipper's teeth. Even to the naked eye, it didn't seem to be Rachel's. Her hair was long and fine, while this was thicker, coarser, and distinctly short, like a man's. When the samples were sent to Wyoming State Lab, the team waited anxiously. Vials with fibers, the hair, and plaster casts were cataloged with detailed notes. In 2007, technology lagged behind later decades, but DNA analysis from hair was feasible. A week later, a preliminary report landed on the police chief's desk. The hair carried male DNA, unrelated to any Moore family member or Rachel's close contacts who provided comparison samples. It was run through CODIS, the national database of DNA from arrested criminals across the U.S. The result was crushing: no match found. No name emerged for police to pursue. This finding offered hope, a trace of another man, but slammed shut the door on quickly identifying a suspect. In the briefing room, a young investigator sighed: "We have his DNA, but he's not in any system. He may never have been arrested or committed a crime before." This meant short-term tracing efforts were nearly futile. Police could only store the sample, preserving it meticulously in the state evidence vault, awaiting future technological advances. Meanwhile, the Firestone tire track was compared to dozens of pickup trucks in Lander and Fremont County. But again, results disappointed. Firestone 2005 tires were too common, used widely, making it impossible to narrow down. Within a 15-mile radius of town, the list of truck owners numbered in the hundreds. The evidence was too broad to pin on anyone specifically. That evening, as the forensic report hit the desk, the investigation team's faces showed exhaustion. The backpack, tire track, fibers, hair, all real clues, but each led to a dead end. Rachel's parents, when briefed, clung to the slim hope that police had the DNA of someone who touched their daughter, that one day technology might name the culprit. So, the samples were resealed, stored in a refrigerated evidence vault in Wyoming, with a brief note: pending future technology. 3 months after Rachel's disappearance, the whiteboard in the Lander Police Department's briefing room still displayed a timeline riddled with question marks. Beside it, an envelope held forensic results, Firestone tire track, strange fibers, unmatched male DNA, sitting dormant, a cold reminder of evidence without a culprit. Throughout the summer, investigators revisited the scene, checked more business cameras, and extended interviews to Riverton and Casper, but nothing new surfaced. Each day, hope of finding Rachel faded, and community pressure turned to skepticism. Townsfolk began whispering that Rachel might have run away, like other teens who vanished and later returned. At a September internal meeting, a young sergeant bluntly raised the runaway theory. He noted that 17-year-olds often clash with family or get drawn into secret relationships or friendships. He cited details: Rachel had her phone, good sneakers, and once told a friend she wanted to leave Lander to see the bigger world. Some in the team nodded, but the police chief hesitated. He knew labeling it a runaway case would scale back the investigation, risking it fading into obscurity. The Moore family reacted fiercely to the suggestion. Mrs. Moore sobbed in the station hallway, insisting her daughter wasn't the type to recklessly leave. Mr. Moore slammed the table, voice choked. She was planning to attend college in Cheyenne. She just got a partial scholarship. You think she'd abandon it all to run off? Their words were not just defiance, but desperation. Sensing the police were letting go, the family relentlessly posted flyers around town, wrote to local papers, and begged the community to keep Rachel's name alive. But reality was harsh. No new witnesses emerged. The dark pickup truck went unidentified. No activity came from Rachel's bank card, and her phone, experts confirmed, went silent around 5 p.m. on June 15th, never reactivating. Investigation meetings grew sparse, with officers shifting to other cases, leaving only a thick file in a cold drawer, awaiting a new chance. By late October, the case was officially classified as a cold case. On paper, suspended, pending new evidence, marked a temporary end. To the family, it felt like a declaration that efforts to find their daughter were over. The Moore home overflowed with Rachel's photos, candles burning nightly to cling to her faint presence. But beyond those walls, the town slipped back to normalcy, and Rachel Moore's name lingered only in hushed cafe conversations. For police, the evidence, tire track, fibers, hair remained sealed in the state archive. The final report ended coldly. Case unsolved. Awaiting technological advancement. From there, the Moore family's pain entered a new phase, silent, persistent, and steeped in darkness. In early 2008, less than a year after Rachel vanished, the Lander Police Department saw a quiet but decisive shift. Her case file was bound in a green folder, labeled Cold Case, and moved to Fremont County's archive. The report's few lines were stark, like a final punctuation: no further evidence, no suspects. Investigation suspended, pending new developments. Officially, the case wasn't closed, but in practice, the investigative machine, already sluggish, nearly halted. Instead of a dedicated team, one investigator was assigned to occasionally revisit the file, skimming reports in quiet afternoons, closing it without new notes. Meanwhile, the Moore family refused that silence. They fought to keep Rachel's name from being buried by time. Mr. Moore printed hundreds of posters with Rachel's radiant smile in her graduation dress. Bold red text reading, "Missing. Have you seen Rachel Moore?" Each weekend, he and his wife traveled Wyoming's small towns, from Riverton to Casper to Rock Springs, posting them on utility poles, in grocery stores, at gas stations. Mrs. Moore knocked on the Lander Journal's door, pleading for Rachel's story to be reprinted, hoping someone passing through town on June 15, 2007, might read it and recall something. They appeared on community radio, voices trembling, repeating, "Does anyone out there know where Rachel is?" Initially, the community listened. A June 2008 article prompted dozens of letters to the paper, some claiming to have seen a girl like Rachel in Colorado, others mentioning a brown-haired waitress in Utah. The family meticulously noted each tip and passed them to police. But time and again, checks revealed mere coincidences: a girl resembling Rachel at a bus stop, a stranger in a distant diner. No lead panned out. Gradually, public enthusiasm waned. By year's end, Posters on the streets were torn by Wyoming's winds, rain blurring the words, with no one bothering to replace them. Some townsfolk sighed when Rachel's name came up. She probably ran off. The family just won't accept it. The Main Street Cafe, once abuzz with talk of the disappearance, moved on to rising gas prices and the upcoming deer season. Oblivion crept in, quiet but certain. In the police file, forensic evidence, male hair, strange fibers, Firestone tire track, remained sealed in storage. A final 2008 note from the lead investigator read simply, "No progress." Those brief words sentenced months of effort to futility. The Moores kept Rachel's photos in their living room, lighting candles nightly, but felt increasingly alone in their fight. The small town moved on, daily life sweeping away attention, and so, Rachel Moore's case, once a community uproar, faded to a silent name in a cold case file, gathering dust in a steel cabinet, awaiting a miracle yet to come. In 2013, over 6 years after Rachel Moore's disappearance slipped quietly into storage, a new breeze stirred in Wyoming. The state's Criminal Investigation Division announced a cold case task force to review long-dormant files local police lacked resources to pursue. Among dozens of cases, Rachel Moore's name from Lander stood out like an unhealed wound. A teen vanishing one summer afternoon, leaving a muddy backpack, conflicting testimonies, and a town that had moved on. On the first day Rachel's file hit the table, the 4 veteran investigators of the cold case team sat around a long desk, facing thick green folders. Lead agent Mark Jensen flipped through reports, his gaze intense. He noted inconsistencies. The woman's claim of seeing Rachel with an older man near the gas station at 4:15 versus the student's account of Rachel walking alone northbound at 4:30. Meanwhile, the convenience store camera caught only a dark pickup truck, its plate obscured, passing after Rachel left. Why haven't we resolved this timeline conflict? Jensen tapped his pen, voice sharp. The team fell silent, then began reviewing the route map, calculating distances and travel times. A few minutes' discrepancy was enough to riddle the timeline with holes. Subsequent meetings focused on evidence. All items were tagged and sealed in the state archive. The backpack, Rachel's white jacket, the strange hair, dark fibers, and Firestone tire cast. In 2007, DNA technology was limited, so only the hair was tested, revealing male DNA unmatched in CODIS. Other evidence went unexamined thoroughly. A young DCI technician, new to the team, spoke up, "We're wasting potential. Since 2007, technology has advanced. We can extract more from the jacket or fibers." The team agreed. A 2013 FBI report noted labs now used touch DNA analysis, isolating samples from tiny skin cells left on fabric surfaces. This opened hope for traces of whoever touched Rachel or her belongings. The white jacket, worn when she left school, became a focal point. Back then, it was sealed without detailed DNA testing due to limited technology. Now DCI decided to reanalyze it, along with the hair and fibers. In a closed briefing, Jensen told colleagues, "We can't turn back time, but we can make silent evidence speak." He ordered a full inventory of remaining evidence, checking the chain of custody for errors. Records showed all samples were properly sealed and stored in cold conditions, a rare stroke of luck. Beyond physical evidence, the team also reviewed witness statements. A clearer picture emerged. Many testimonies, once dismissed as inconclusive, now showed suspicious inconsistencies when placed side by side. Some individuals, like drivers passing the gas station that day, were only briefly interviewed and never followed up with. Jensen noted, they needed to recontact witnesses after 6 years to see what memories lingered. Though human memory fades, sometimes time makes witnesses more willing to share what they once hesitated to reveal. Still, the team knew the key no longer lay in memories, but in physical evidence. After 3 weeks of review, the final decision was made. Send the white jacket, hair, and dark fibers to a state-of-the-art lab in Cheyenne, and coordinate with the FBI for testing with the latest technology. An official request was drafted, and evidence was sealed for transfer. As Jensen signed the handover, he glanced at Rachel's smiling photo in the file. 6 years had passed, but he knew a single DNA match could transform the cold case. On September 17, 2013, a DCI transport van left Fremont County's evidence vault, carrying sealed packages holding the Moore family's last hope. The transfer order read, "Priority, Cold Case Analysis." A young officer escorting the van, double-checking the seals, whispered, "Maybe this is when Rachel gets to speak." The sealed packages containing the white jacket, hair, and dark fibers arrived at Cheyenne's advanced lab in tense silence. Technicians in white lab coats and rubber gloves opened each evidence bag, placing items under the cold light of specialized lamps. This was no routine task. They knew a single skin cell could break 6 years of deadlock. First, the jacket was processed using touch DNA, sampling areas likely touched: cuffs, collar, and zipper. Then, all samples, jacket, hair, and fibers, were sent to the specialized DNA analysis unit. For weeks, machines ran non-stop. Samples were processed with Y-star analysis, a technique amplifying and reading DNA segments on the Y chromosome, inherited paternally. This method was key in cases where a victim's female DNA might overshadow male traces. When initial results came back, technicians held their breath. Male DNA emerged, clear enough for a full profile. Samples from the hair and jacket cuff matched, proving one man had touched Rachel or her belongings. The news reached the DCI cold case team. In the briefing room, Agent Mark Jensen tapped the report, eyes gleaming. "We've got him. We have the DNA profile of whoever directly contacted Rachel." But he and the team knew the next step was critical, comparing it to CODIS, the national database of criminal DNA across the U.S. A match could lead straight to a suspect. Results returned in 2 days. On the computer screen, a brief line appeared, "No match found." No hit, no name, no profile, just like in 2007. Silence blanketed the room. 6 years of waiting, months of analysis, and one no match erased hopes of an immediate suspect. A technician muttered, "He's never been caught, never in the system. He's out there free." Jensen gripped the report, then set it down. He knew CODIS wasn't the end. Since 2011, forensic communities had explored genetic genealogy, using DNA to trace family trees and narrow down suspects' relatives instead of relying on CODIS. The method was new, legally debated, but Jensen sensed it was their only path. He addressed the team firmly. "If he's not in CODIS, his family is in some public database. We have to try." In that internal meeting, the cold case team logged, proposed sending Y-star and autosomal DNA profiles to a partner lab for genealogical search. No one promised results, but for the first time in years, Rachel Moore's case stood at a new crossroads. Leaving the meeting, Jensen paused by Rachel's photo on the board. The 17-year-old's bright smile became the heart of an investigative technology revolution. He whispered to himself, "We won't let you vanish without meaning. If there's a path, we'll take it." Once the genetic genealogy decision was approved, Rachel Moore's DNA profile was transferred from the state lab to an FBI-partnered unit specializing in genetic genealogy. In early 2014, the profile was uploaded to GEDmatch, a public database where Americans trace ancestors and distant relatives. No one in Wyoming's DCI cold case team forgot the thrill when the computer displayed initial results. Dozens of matches with individuals who had voluntarily submitted family DNA. Most were distant, third or fourth cousins, but each name and gene segment was a piece of a vast family tree. Over weeks, genealogists worked tirelessly with dense charts. From hundreds of initial matches, they narrowed down a family branch centered around Casper, Wyoming. Distant relatives converged into a tighter network, finally pointing to a few lineages, likely to include the individual matching the DNA from Rachel's jacket. One name stood out: Mark Johnson, 45, born and raised in Casper, who lived in Lander for a few years around the time Rachel vanished. Public records showed Johnson worked temporarily for a road construction company in Fremont County. He left Lander in 2009, returning to Casper, living quietly in a suburb. Notably, state vehicle records confirmed Johnson owned a red 2005 Ford F-150, a model often fitted with Firestone tires, suspiciously matching the track found near the ditch in 2007. Police marked this on the evidence board, circling it twice in red. Jensen and the cold case team tempered their excitement. Genealogy didn't pinpoint one suspect but mapped a family, narrowing possibilities. Yet Johnson stood out. Residency records showed he lived less than 2 miles from Rachel's high school in 2007, and his address was a 3-minute drive from the convenience store where she bought water. To strengthen the case, they dug into Johnson's past. He had minor infractions, drunk driving, a bar fight, but no serious arrests, explaining why his DNA wasn't in Cody's. Former Lander neighbors described him as gruff, prone to cursing, but no one suspected him of a disappearance. However, one woman recalled Johnson often left in the late afternoon, driving his red pickup, sometimes returning with muddy clothes. This was logged as a potential match to the ditch where Rachel's backpack was found. In the DCI briefing room, the old case timeline was updated, now listing Johnson under persons of interest. A red line connected the dark pickup on the convenience store camera to the Firestone tire track at the ditch, then to Johnson, owner of a 2005 red F-150. Jensen nodded slightly. He's not the only answer, but he's the strongest suspect we've had in 6 years. The team opted for surveillance. Lacking evidence for an arrest warrant, they had enough to scrutinize Johnson. A small team was sent to Casper, posing as utility workers and delivery drivers, tracking his routine. They logged his stops, stores he visited, even the bar he frequented. The goal was to collect indirect DNA from a cigarette, beer can, or half-drunk coffee. On the last day of November 2013, the first surveillance report reached DCI. Johnson lived alone, no family, worked irregular hours. He often returned home late, sometimes with dirt-covered tool bags. The team photographed him, driving a newer gray pickup, but the 2005 red Ford had been sold, its whereabouts unknown. This pushed Jensen's team to secure direct DNA from Johnson to compare with the 2007 YS tar sample. In an internal report, Jensen wrote concisely, Johnson, primary surveillance subject, likelihood of involvement, high, DNA comparison needed. From a case seemingly lost to oblivion, Rachel Moore was once again the focus of an investigation. This time, instead of gaps and dead ends, the team had a specific target to track. In early December 2013, the DCI Wyoming surveillance team quietly maintained a presence in Casper. They rented a small apartment across from the auto garage where Mark Johnson worked, setting up antennas for secure communication and splitting shifts around the clock. Johnson, the man they believed held the key to Rachel Moore's case, followed a rigid routine, driving his gray pickup to the garage at 8 a.m., working under cars until evening, then stopping at a bar near CY Avenue before returning to his suburban home. To neighbors, he was just a gruff middle-aged man who liked cheap beer and football. But to investigators, his every move carried the potential to crack a 6-year cold case. To move forward, Jensen and his team knew they needed Johnson's DNA for comparison. Without a search warrant, direct collection was impossible, so they relied on him leaving biological traces in daily life. Cigarette butts, soda cans, straws, napkins. The surveillance team patiently tracked his habits, noting he smoked Marlboro Reds, often flicking butts onto the ground outside the bar, and drank Mountain Dew, tossing empty cans into a garage trash bin. On December 12th, the first opportunity arose. An agent, posing as a car repair customer, watched Johnson step outside to smoke. When he tossed a half-burned cigarette onto the pavement, another agent swiftly approached, pretending to drop keys, and collected the butt in a sterile plastic bag. The first piece of evidence was labeled, time-stamped, and rushed to the Cheyenne lab that night. But the results disappointed. The DNA was too degraded for a complete profile. Jensen clutched the file, growling, "We need more. We can't rely on a rotten cigarette. On December 18th, the team tried again. They noticed Johnson's habit of buying canned soda from a vending machine near the garage, drinking it, and tossing the can into a public trash bin. That afternoon, as he walked away, an agent retrieved a Mountain Dew can, still damp with condensation, and sealed it in an evidence bag. This time, the lab processed it meticulously, extracting skin cells from the can's rim. A week later, the report arrived, a complete male DNA profile, ready to compare with the 2007 sample from Rachel's jacket. When Jensen read the final result, the room fell silent. Match confirmed. The soda can's DNA perfectly matched the DNA on Rachel's jacket cuff. The 6-year investigation, from the muddy backpack in the ditch to GED match and covert surveillance, converged on one name, Mark Johnson. A young investigator dropped their pen, whispering, "We've got him." Excitement mixed with gravity filled the room. Jensen knew this was the decisive evidence, a turning point transforming a stalled case into one ready for an arrest warrant. But he also knew every step forward had to be calculated. A single misstep could alert Johnson, leading him to destroy evidence or flee. In an internal report to DCI's director, Jensen wrote clearly, "DNA sample from Mark Johnson matches evidence on victim Rachel Moore's jacket. Recommend advancing case to prosecution preparation, seeking search and arrest warrants." The state prosecutor was notified immediately, receiving the full evidence chain, from the Firestone tire track and convenience store camera to genealogical DNA and the soda can sample. That night, Jensen sat alone in his office, staring at Rachel's smiling photo on the whiteboard. 6 years of witnesses, fleeting hopes, and dead ends had led to undeniable proof. He whispered, "Rachel, we're about to bring the truth to light." With the DNA match confirmed, the DCI Wyoming cold case team wasted no time. Jensen knew that to secure Johnson's arrest warrant, they needed not just biological evidence, but a comprehensive reconstruction of the day Rachel vanished. Old files, once deemed useless, were spread across the table. Every statement, receipt, and digital record was woven into a detailed timeline of June 15th, 2007, Rachel's last day. It began at 3:45 p.m. The dismissal bell rang at Lander High School. School cameras captured students pouring out, including Rachel Moore in her white jacket, leaving with friends. At 3:52 p.m., the convenience store camera recorded Rachel buying water and exiting. This was her last preserved image. Moments later, at 3:54, the same camera caught headlights and the silhouette of a dark pickup truck passing through, matching the 2005 Ford F-150 style Johnson owned. The team revisited 2007 cell tower data, initially checked only cursorily by local police. They traced records from Johnson's phone provider, pinpointing his number. Logs showed his phone pinging a tower near Main Street and the convenience store from 3:50 to 4:20 p.m., exactly where Rachel was last seen. After 4:20, his phone moved north, near the road where a student reported seeing Rachel walking alone. The alignment chilled the team. Johnson was present at both critical moments, after Rachel left the store and when a witness saw her heading north. To bolster this, they cross-checked vehicle records. Johnson owned a red F-150 from 2005 to late 2008, fitted with Firestone tires, matching the track found near the ditch where Rachel's backpack was discovered. Though the truck was sold, insurance documents and old garage photos confirmed he drove it regularly during the case's time frame. Every detail was threaded together. At 4:15 p.m., a woman reported seeing Rachel near the gas station talking to an older man in a long-sleeved shirt, fitting Johnson, then 39. At 4:30, another student saw Rachel walking north. Cell tower data placed Johnson's phone in that area simultaneously. What seemed like conflicting testimonies now formed a chilling sequence. Johnson may have approached Rachel at the gas station, then coerced or led her northward. The completed timeline on the whiteboard traced a cold path to the truth. 3:45. Rachel left school, 3:52, at the convenience store. 3:54, Johnson's F-150 passed by. 4:15, Rachel seen with an unknown man at the gas station. 4:20, Johnson's phone pinged nearby. 4:30, Rachel last seen heading north, with Johnson's phone in the same coverage area. An hour later, cell tower data showed Johnson moving toward the suburbs. In the final timeline briefing, Johnson stood before the board, voice steady but firm. "We have DNA, we have the truck, we have cell towers, placing him at the scene. It all aligned. 6 years of deadlock now point straight to Johnson." No one objected. Without a confession, every piece, from modern genealogy to old telecom data, formed an undeniable picture. When the completed report reached the Wyoming state prosecutor, bolded conclusions read, "Timeline fully aligns Mark Johnson's movements with victim Rachel Moore's disappearance." This was the foundation for the next phase, securing search and arrest warrants the town had awaited for years. As the timeline report reached the Wyoming State Prosecutor's office, all eyes turned to Jensen and the cold case team. DNA matched, cell tower data and cameras tied Johnson to Rachel's disappearance. But for an arrest warrant, prosecutors demanded more physical evidence proving Johnson handled or moved with Rachel. A search warrant for his home and garage was approved, backed by a Fremont County court order. On the morning of January 5, 2014, DCI and FBI vehicles quietly entered Johnson's suburban Casper neighborhood. He had left early for the garage, leaving his single-story home and small backyard shed empty. As the rusty metal garage door was lifted, the smell of motor oil and metal dust hit. Flashlights swept across wooden shelves, packed with toolboxes, plastic bins, and oil-stained work clothes. A forensic technician spotted a dark fabric scrap in a corner, mixed with machine rags. It was immediately seized and sealed. In the mobile lab outside, preliminary results stunned the team. The fabric held skin cell traces matching Rachel Moore's DNA. Jensen stared at the analyzer's numbers, nodding firmly. "This is the piece we needed." Continuing the search, the team opened a rusty metal drawer containing old papers and crumpled topographic maps. One map stopped them. It detailed the Popo Agie Wilderness, where Rachel's search yielded nothing. Marked in red ink were several small trails, one near a remote mountain ravine. No one knew why Johnson kept a map with such odd markings, but the coincidence made it valuable evidence. Inside the main house, police searched closets, desks, and the attic. A strange find emerged in a bedroom drawer, a black notebook with messy entries from 2007. However, many middle pages were torn out, leaving jagged edges. The remaining pages held brief notes: 6/15, "Don't forget," "That night," "Silence," and cryptic symbols. Forensic experts carefully separated each page, sending them for handwriting and pressure mark analysis. Every room was photographed panoramically before the search. On a dusty desk, they found an old tin box containing football game tickets, receipts, and Polaroid photos of Johnson beside his red F-150. The photos, dated 2007 on the edges, confirmed he owned the exact truck matching the tire tracks by the ditch. With all evidence packed into 2 sealed boxes, Jensen halted the search. Standing on the porch, he gazed at the drab house under the winter afternoon light, a mix of satisfaction and chills washing over him. Satisfaction from gathering enough evidence, and unease at how Johnson lived calmly for 7 years among incriminating items, as if nothing happened. In that evening's briefing, evidence was listed: the fabric with Rachel's DNA, the trail map with red circles near Popo Agie, the 2007 notebook with torn pages, and Polaroids of the red pickup. The state prosecutor nodded slightly after reviewing the list. "This is the foundation. We've crossed the threshold for an arrest warrant." The team stayed late in the lit room, evidence boxes neatly stacked in a corner. No one spoke it aloud, but all knew the time to act had come. Johnson was no longer just a surveillance subject. He was the official suspect. And the court would soon issue a warrant to bring him into the interrogation room, where truths buried for 7 years might finally surface. In September 2021, nearly 8 years after the DCI cold case team first flagged Mark Johnson, Fremont County Court issued his arrest warrant. A 1,000-page file from matching DNA to cell tower data to the 2007 notebook was submitted as an unspoken indictment. On the morning of September 14th, under Casper's overcast sky, FBI and DCI Wyoming vehicles quietly gathered near Johnson's suburban neighborhood. The order was clear: act swiftly, giving the suspect no chance to resist or destroy evidence. At 7:45 a.m., Johnson drove his gray pickup from the garage after a night shift, stepping out in his driveway when shouts rang out. FBI, freeze, don't move. Red and blue lights flashed as agents rushed from both sides. Johnson froze, hands raised instinctively, eyes wide with shock. The 53-year-old, accustomed to the quiet of his small street, was tackled to the pavement, cold handcuffs locking his wrists. Neighbors peeked through curtains, gasps and murmurs spreading. They couldn't believe the man who casually greeted them or borrowed tools was the suspect in a 14-year-old Wyoming mystery. As news spread, Lander erupted. Local papers ran bold headlines. Mark Johnson arrested in Rachel Moore case. Most shocking was confirmation that Johnson had joined the 2007 volunteer search for Rachel, walking ditches, shining flashlights into bushes, even standing beside her parents at a community prayer vigil. The thought that the perpetrator blended into the search for his victim chilled the town. The Moore family, upon hearing the news, couldn't hold back tears. Mrs. Moore sobbed in her husband's arms, torn between pain and relief. Finally, our daughter might get justice. Reporters swarmed Casper, aiming lenses at Johnson's rundown house, where he lived quietly for years. Interviewed neighbors shook their heads, repeating, "We never suspected. Never." En route to DCI headquarters in Cheyenne, the atmosphere in the vehicle was heavy. Johnson sat with his head bowed, face ashen, eyes avoiding the agent's gazes. Jensen, in the front, clutched the thick file, knowing the arrest was only the start. The interrogation would be where every detail and piece of evidence faced the suspect. After 14 years, the only chance to learn exactly what happened to Rachel lay in that cold interrogation room. That afternoon, as the convoy entered DCI Wyoming's gates, a small crowd of reporters, locals, and victim justice advocates waited. Cameras clicked as Johnson, in a crumpled shirt and handcuffs, was led inside. Media called it a historic turning point. Wyoming's biggest cold case finally has a suspect. The heavy steel door closed behind Johnson, cutting him off from daylight and the community's clamor. Ahead lay one path, the hallway to the interrogation room, where secrets buried since 2007 awaited revelation. As the second steel door shut, the setting shifted, a cramped room lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Mark Johnson sat on a metal chair, wrists still marked by cuffs, eyes vacant, staring at the stainless steel table. Across from him were Agent Mark Jensen and a DCI colleague. On the table lay the thick file, crime scene photos, the timeline reconstructing every minute of June 15, 2007, and the bolded DNA report, match confirmed. For hours, Jensen was patient. He started with simple, repeated questions. Where was Johnson that afternoon? Did he know Rachel? Had he driven his red F-150 near the school? Johnson stayed silent, occasionally smirking, but his bloodshot eyes darted away. Jensen didn't rush. He laid out photos one by one, the muddy backpack, Firestone tire track, then the enlarged DNA profile. "This is science," Jensen said evenly. "You can stay quiet, but DNA doesn't. It places you with Rachel the day she vanished." Johnson shifted, shoulders trembling slightly. Jensen continued with the timeline. 3:52, Rachel left the convenience store. 3:54, the F-150 passed on camera. 4:15, a witness saw her with an older man. 4:20, Johnson's phone pinged near the gas station. "You were there. You can't deny it," Jensen pressed. Johnson's hands clenched, his face frozen. The room sank into heavy silence, broken only by the faint tap of a pen. After nearly 4 hours, Johnson still hadn't spoken. Officers took turns leaving, letting him sit alone with the gray walls and Rachel's photos before him. When Jensen returned, he brought no new evidence, just a single photo of Rachel smiling at her graduation, placed squarely in front of him. "This girl deserves to go home to her family," Jensen said softly. "Her parents have waited 14 years. Only you know where she is." Johnson's eyes flickered. Suddenly he slumped, hands clasped tightly, breathing heavily. After a long silence, his voice rasped, "She died that night." Jensen stayed still, listening. Johnson looked up, eyes red, and continued, "I didn't mean to, but it happened. I took her, and I couldn't let her go back." The room felt frozen. Jensen pressed calmly. "What did you do after? Where's Rachel?" Johnson bit his lip, silent for ages, then whispered as if confessing to himself, "I hid her, in a ravine, in Shoshone National Forest, about 3 miles off the main trail. I covered her with leaves and rocks. No one would find her." His words sent chills through the observation room's investigators. This was the detail the Moore family and Wyoming police had craved for 14 years. Jensen locked eyes with Johnson, voice firm. "You're going to take us there, now." Johnson didn't resist, head bowed, as if the weight of his buried secret had finally crushed him. The forensic team was alerted immediately. Specialized vehicles were prepped for Shoshone National Forest, where Johnson claimed to have hidden the body. Forensic staff gathered excavation tools, bone bags, and GPS devices. Jensen stepped into the hallway, taking a deep breath. The interrogation wasn't over, but the biggest breakthrough had arrived. After over a decade of deadlock, the truth was emerging from the suspect's own mouth. On the morning of September 16, 2021, as faint sunlight pierced the dense pines of Shoshone National Forest, DCI Wyoming and FBI vehicles ventured deep into the remote area, per Johnson's directions. Cold mountain wind carried the sharp scent of pine resin, and the crunch of tires on rocky ground was eerie. Johnson, handcuffed, rode in a separate vehicle with 3 armed agents. He gave directions in a low, halting voice, weighed down by his past. Jensen, in the front, marked coordinates on a topographic map. At a narrow trail, the vehicles stopped. The group had to trek 3 miles on foot, following Johnson's lead. Agents took the lead, followed by forensics with backpacks of excavation tools, bone bags, and cameras to document every step. Shoshone's forest was dark. Sunlight dappled on the ground, amplifying the eerie scene. A young investigator later said each step felt like walking into the past shadows. Johnson, escorted tightly, eyes dull and face pale, stopped at a narrow ravine covered in loose rocks and dry leaves. Pointing, he mumbled, "There, for 14 years." The air thickened, everyone silent. The forensic team set up temporary barriers and photographed the scene before digging. GPS marked coordinates, cameras captured every moment. Every detail had to be pristine for court. As the first layer of leaves and rocks was cleared, a musty smell rose. Beneath shallow soil, an old, darkened nylon tarp emerged. Forensics carefully lifted its corners, sealing it in an evidence bag. Then, a sight choked the group, pale human bones mixed with tattered fabric. A white sneaker, stained but bearing a familiar logo Rachel's parents described, lay nearby. A piece of white jacket, muddy but intact, was also found. The team stood still. An investigator bowed their head, whispering, "Rachel, we've finally found you." The work proceeded in absolute silence. Each bone was numbered and placed in specialized bags. The sneaker and jacket were sealed separately for fabric analysis. The torn tarp was preserved. It might hold clues to how Johnson concealed the body. Cameras captured every angle, each soil layer measured and marked. When the partial remains were fully recovered, the forensic team removed their gloves, bowing in a moment of silence. It wasn't just procedure, it was a final respect for Rachel after 14 years in the forest darkness. At Cheyenne's coroner lab, bones were analyzed overnight. The medical examiner compared Rachel's 2006 dental records to the remaining teeth. The match was perfect. Bone marrow DNA was also cross-checked with her mother's sample. After 48 hours, the final report confirmed remains identified as Rachel Moore, born 1990, missing since June 15, 2007. Holding the report, Jensen felt a massive weight lift, yet grief flooded in. He called the Moore family. Mrs. Moore sobbed, repeating, "Thank you, thank you. She's finally coming home." Mr. Moore, voice trembling but firm, said, "We waited 14 years for this." At a September 20, 2021, press conference, Wyoming police announced, the Rachel Moore cold case is solved. The victim's remains were found in Shoshone National Forest, based on suspect Mark Johnson's confession. Dozens of microphones pointed forward, camera flashes relentless. Jensen, at the podium, spoke slowly. "We promised the Moore family in 2007 we'd never give up. Today, that promise is fulfilled." The cold case, Rachel Moore file was marked closed. The dusty green folder, after over a decade, bore a red note, "Homicide solved." In the archive, it no longer sat as an old wound, but stood as proof of science and persistence. For the Moores, it was a moment of pain and release. They could finally bury their daughter, ending a long journey in darkness. On September 20, 2021, the Wyoming State Police press room in Cheyenne was packed. Dozens of reporters from Casper Star-Tribune, Denver Post, AP and CNN crowded in, microphones clustered on the podium. The air was heavy with tension and anticipation. For 14 years, Rachel Moore's name lingered in old news clips and faded posters on Landers utility poles. Now it resurfaced with finality. Before a dark green draped podium, veteran Detective Jensen, face etched with exhaustion from sleepless nights, stood with FBI and Fremont County's chief prosecutor. Clearing his throat, he scanned the cameras and said slowly, "Today, we confirm, remains excavated in Shoshone National Forest were identified via DNA and dental records as Rachel Moore, missing since June 15, 2007. This case is now solved." The room fell silent, then erupted in murmurs, typing, and flashing lights. Jensen continued, voice lowering, "We've arrested Mark Johnson, 59, of Casper, Wyoming. He admitted his role in Rachel's death and led us to her remains. Scene DNA, physical evidence, and timeline confirmed Johnson as the perpetrator." Reporters raised hands. One shouted, "Did Johnson join the 2007 volunteer search for Rachel?" Jensen nodded curtly, "Yes." That's what makes this case so shocking. A Denver Post reporter asked, "How did DNA technology drive this breakthrough?" Jensen detailed YSTR and genetic genealogy, explaining how family tree tracing led to Johnson's Casper relatives. "Without scientific advances and lab collaboration, we wouldn't be here." His words were scribbled down, spreading instantly on social media. An FBI investigator added, "This proves the power of open data and persistence." Cold cases aren't forgotten. The Fremont prosecutor closed. "Will charge Johnson with first-degree murder." Prosecution begins next week. News spread beyond Wyoming. CNN ran, "Wyoming 2007 cold case solved. Arrest shocks community." The New York Times published a feature on genealogy solving murders, citing Rachel Moore as a symbol of delayed justice. On social media, #JusticeForRachel trended, with thousands of shares in hours. Amid the media storm, the Moore family chose silence, issuing a brief statement via their lawyer. "We're grateful our daughter is coming home. This ends a long, painful journey. We now wish for Rachel to rest in peace." As the press conference ended, Jensen left the podium, shoulders heavy, having fulfilled a 14-year promise, but facing a new burden, the trial reviving it all. That night, Rachel's story aired on national networks, from Fox News to NBC. Old photos, 17-year-old Rachel smiling, in her white uniform jacket, flashed alongside images of Johnson being led to jail. Wyoming, typically quiet, became a focal point. A 2007 case, once deemed forgotten, closed with a final answer, but opened unanswered questions about darkness within this small community. In the days after the seismic press conference, the atmosphere in Cheyenne and Lander was unusually tense. The biggest question was no longer who killed Rachel Moore, but whether the evidence was strong enough to make Mark Johnson pay in court. At Fremont County's prosecutor's office, files, recordings, and DNA samples filled desks. Chief Prosecutor Karen Whitfield led morning meetings, voice firm, "We must assemble every piece into an unassailable picture." She pointed to a large timeline board, from Rachel leaving the convenience store on June 15, 2007, to the backpack found by the ditch, to DNA on her jacket, to the remains unearthed in Shoshone National Forest. Each detail was pinned in red, connected by lines forming a seamless logic chain. DNA evidence was the centerpiece. The lab report stated, YS tar and autosomal DNA from the jacket and hair on the backpack matched Johnson's cigarette sample perfectly, with a 1 in trillions exclusion probability. Combined with Rachel's remains being found exactly where Johnson described, a detail no one else could know, the prosecution believed the chain was complete. But Whitfield knew the defense would dissect it mercilessly. Johnson's lawyers, led by Robert Klein, strategized. They targeted a weakness, the interrogation confession. Klein argued Johnson was questioned for hours without a lawyer, coerced and mentally exhausted into confessing. "If we suppress the confession, we remove a key piece," Klein told his team in a private meeting. They also revisited 2007's investigation flaws, overlooked blurry cameras, the runaway theory, hoping to plant doubt that police could be wrong again. The prosecution prepared a counter. They had the full interrogation recording. Johnson was read his Miranda rights, agreed to talk, even requested breaks for water and smoking. Agent Jensen, present, provided a detailed affidavit. No coercion, no threats. He was silent for hours, but confessed voluntarily about the body's location. Crucially, the remains were found exactly where Johnson described, physical evidence courts couldn't ignore. The prosecution also bolstered peripheral evidence, cell tower data showing Johnson's phone pinging where Rachel vanished that afternoon. Blurry camera footage of a dark pickup moving toward the trail, matching Johnson's former vehicle in his old garage. Police found fabric with Rachel's DNA and a Popo Agie trail map with red circles. All formed a cohesive chain Whitfield was confident would withstand any rebuttal. In November 2021, the preliminary hearing took place at Fremont County Court. The courtroom was packed, reporters jostling, locals filling back rows. Whitfield presented DNA results, Johnson's confession, garage evidence, and Rachel's remains analysis. She stated firmly, "No one but Johnson could know the burial location. This isn't coincidence, it's a crime." Defense lawyer Klein objected, demanding the confession be suppressed as involuntary. He emphasized the lengthy interrogation, claiming mental pressure. The judge listened, then ordered the recording played. In the courtroom, Johnson's voice echoed, calm and clear, describing the Shoshone Ravine. He even sketched a map, marking turns and paths. The room fell silent. When the recording ended, the judge banged the gavel, voice stern. "The confession was voluntary and lawful. All evidence is admissible." The prosecution exhaled, while Klein bowed his head, knowing their key card had failed. The hearing concluded with the decision, Mark Johnson would be prosecuted for first-degree murder, with the formal trial set for spring 2022. Evening News aired footage of Johnson in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, being led from the courtroom. A ticker ran across the screen, Rachel Moore cold case moves to trial, DNA evidence, timeline, and excavated remains accepted by court. For the Lander community, what was once a 14-year shadow had now turned into the glaring light of justice, with the next battle to unfold in the courtroom. On March 14, 2022, Fremont County Courthouse became Wyoming's focal point. Despite lingering winter chill, dozens of Lander residents stood outside from early morning, many holding large photos of Rachel Moore, a reminder that this wasn't just a trial of one man, but a reckoning for 15 years of delayed justice. Inside, the courtroom was thick with tension, every wooden seat filled by CNN, AP, and local reporters. Mark Johnson, in an orange jumpsuit, head bowed, was brought to the defendant's chair. His appearance sparked murmurs from the back. Many recalled his face from the 2007 volunteer searches for Rachel. Chief Prosecutor Karen Whitfield opened with a nearly 2-hour presentation. She took the jury back to the sweltering afternoon of June 15, 2007. Rachel Moore left school at 3:45, stopped at a convenience store for water, chatted briefly with friends, and stepped outside, phone in hand. That was the last time she was seen alive. Slides flashed. The muddy green backpack by the ditch, blurry camera footage of a dark pickup, and a timeline synced with Johnson's phone data. We will prove that from that day until her remains were unearthed in Shoshone National Forest in 2021, every trace points to one person, the defendant, Mark Johnson. As the prosecution recounted 2007 to 2021, the courtroom was pulled through time. Whitfield highlighted milestones: the failed search, the case going cold, DNA technology breaking ground, genealogy tracing a Casper family, covert surveillance collecting cigarette butts and soda cans. The final slide showed the tarp-wrapped bones in Shoshone, silencing the room. This is the end of the journey. Whitfield paused, staring at the jury, an undeniable proof that Rachel's life was taken by him. Forensic experts testified. Dr. Laura Peters, Wyoming DCI examiner, detailed the excavation. We followed the defendant's precise directions. In a remote ravine, eroded soil revealed an old tarp. Inside were human bones, a size 6 women's sneaker, and a stained white jacket. Samples were sealed and sent to Cheyenne's lab. Dental and DNA tests confirmed it was Rachel Moore. Her voice wavered at the identification moment, but every word was precise, leaving no detail unaddressed. Civilian witnesses followed. A gray-haired woman, living near the gas station in 2007, recalled seeing Rachel talking to a middle-aged man by a red pickup. I thought they knew each other, but looking back, I'm certain it was Johnson, she said, pointing at the defendant. A former classmate, now in his 20s, testified. I remember after school that day, Rachel walked north. I didn't see anyone with her, but a truck trailed slowly behind. Testimonies wove together, sometimes conflicting, but collectively painted a picture. Rachel vanished in a shadow where Johnson was present. Defense lawyer Robert Klein repeatedly objected, arguing witnesses' memories were unreliable after 15 years and the camera footage too blurry to convict. Each time the prosecution countered with evidence, photos of Johnson's 2007 pickup, phone location data, or DNA reports, with absolute exclusion probability. The judge banged the gavel, dismissing objections as evidence sufficiently compelling for the jury. Late morning, when the prosecution played Johnson's confession about the body's location, the courtroom held its breath. His calm voice described the ravine, the tarp, the hidden jacket. Some of Rachel's relatives sobbed, needing police escorts out. The jury sat stone-faced, some visibly pale. The first day ended with the prosecution successfully tracing the journey from an ordinary Lander afternoon to Rachel's return after 14 years. As the courtroom emptied into the sunset, no one dared call it a mysterious disappearance anymore. It was now a murder case with towering evidence, and defendant Mark Johnson sat at its center. The trial had just begun, but the atmosphere signaled a long legal battle ahead, where truth would face every attempt to deny it. 3 days after closing arguments, the jury room at Fremont County Courthouse became Wyoming's tensest space. 12 jurors, diverse in age and profession, sat around a long wooden table, facing thick files, crime scene photos, DNA reports, phone data, timelines, Popo Agie trail maps, and Johnson's confession recording. No one spoke immediately. The silence was heavy, as if all knew their decision would shape a man's fate. and deliver or deny justice for a family waiting 15 years. Debate erupted when some jurors expressed caution. A middle-aged man said, witnesses recalling after 15 years, "Can we trust that?" A woman countered, "But we have DNA," and he revealed the body's location. No one else could know. The discussion circled, sometimes leaning toward lesser charges, then returning to the core. Evidence aligned perfectly, leaving no escape. They replayed Johnson's recording describing the ravine and tarp. The room fell silent as his gravelly voice said, "You dig down 6 feet, you'll see," and they did. Rachel's remains were found. On day 2, they dissected intent. One asked, was this premeditated murder or a spur-of-the-moment act? A former teacher responded, he stalked, he lured, and hid her for years. That's not impulsive, it's planned. After reviewing the charges, most agreed the crimes fit first-degree murder and kidnapping. On day 3, after multiple votes, all 12 jurors reached consensus. The foreperson wrote the verdict on a white sheet, signed it, and knocked to signal a decision. The courtroom filled again. Rachel's family sat in front, hands clasped. Johnson entered, face ashen, eyes on the floor. The judge called for standing as the foreperson read, "We, the jury, after considering all evidence, find the defendant Mark Johnson guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of kidnapping." A sob escaped Rachel's mother. Her father bowed his head, tears falling uncontrollably. In the back, Lander's community exhaled, some crying into their hands. Johnson barely reacted, only trembling slightly in his cuffed hands. The judge faced the defendant, voice firm. "Mr. Johnson, your crime stole a 17-year-old's life, inflicting over a decade of pain on her family and community. With undeniable evidence and the jury's unanimous verdict, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without parole." The gavel struck, echoing through the room. The sentence was more than a punishment. It was symbolic. It affirmed that even after 14 years, justice could prevail. Reporters rushed from their seats, typing frantically, "Wyoming cold case closed. Johnson sentenced to life without parole." Evening News replayed Rachel in her school uniform, alongside Johnson in prison garb. Two halves of a tragic story, ending in justice. As the van took Johnson away, shouts rose from the crowd. Justice for Rachel. In the emptying courtroom, the Moore family lingered, clutching their daughter's framed photo. After 15 years, they finally heard the two words they'd awaited, guilty. The verdict closed, but the Rachel Moore case's ripples spread across Wyoming like waves on a lake. For Lander, the shock wasn't just that Rachel was murdered, but who did it. Mark Johnson wasn't a stranger. He joined the 2007 volunteer searches, waded through Popo Agie forests, handed out flyers, even comforted the Moores on camera. Many recalled him in the search lines, flashlight in hand, face earnest, like a concerned neighbor. When the truth emerged, the community reeled. "We trusted him," a resident told a local paper. Who could imagine the searcher was the hider? This betrayal deepened the town's pain, forcing them to question, do we truly know those living beside us? For the Moore family, the verdict brought what they'd sought for 15 years, truth and a proper burial for Rachel. In April 2022, her funeral was held at a small Lander cemetery. A white flower-draped coffin was lowered, beside photos of Rachel smiling in her school uniform. Her parents embraced, tears mixing with the cold spring wind. "We've finally brought our daughter home," her mother whispered, voice choked. Hundreds attended, many from the 2007 searches. It wasn't just a funeral, but a community's farewell to a haunting chapter. Within Wyoming's investigative circles, Rachel's case became a turning point. Detectives admitted that in 2007, limited resources and technology stalled the case. The runaway theory, once floated, hurt the family deeply. Now, many openly acknowledged that mistake. A DCI Wyoming spokesperson said, "We learned never to dismiss a family's voice. When they said their daughter didn't run away, we should have listened." Crucially, the case proved genetic genealogy's power, linking DNA to family trees. Without it, Johnson might have walked free forever. The case's success drew national attention. At forensic and investigative conferences, Wyoming 2007 cold case, Rachel Moore became a model. Reports on YSTAR analysis, GED match family tracing, and covert SOTACAN DNA collection became training material. Montana, Colorado, and Nebraska sent teams to Wyoming to study the process. The FBI listed the case as proof that genealogical DNA could shift the tide in cold cases. For American society, Rachel's case sent a resounding message: cold cases aren't dead. New technology can breathe life into dusty files. Thousands of families awaiting answers gained hope that, even after decades, justice could arrive. Lander's lesson spurred states to revisit old missing persons cases, especially those with stored DNA. It also underscored persistence, from a family posting flyers for 15 years, to investigators never quitting, to labs advancing techniques. Yet, the ripples left psychological scars. Many Lander residents admitted they no longer saw their community the same. Johnson came to our BBQs, fixed neighbors' cars, one told the Casper Star-Tribune. Now, knowing he hid that secret, it's chilling. This distrust would take years to heal. Still, the transparent investigation, public trial, and harsh sentence helped the town face the truth. For lawmakers, the case sparked debate about expanding cold case unit budgets and clarifying regulations on using public genealogical DNA databases. Some raised privacy concerns, but most supported prioritizing victims' justice. Without genealogical DNA, Rachel would still lie unnamed in that ravine, a Wyoming senator stated. Ultimately, Rachel's case became a legacy, not of tragic death, but of persistence and new technology. It showed a small Wyoming community, once overshadowed, rewriting national crime investigation history. Rachel Moore's posters, still hung in a few Lander shops, no longer pleas for help but symbols. Justice may come late, but it never vanishes. The Rachel Moore case in Wyoming isn't just a closed criminal file after 15 years. It reflects facets of American society today. First, it reminds us of the danger in blindly trusting normal appearances. Mark Johnson was a friendly neighbor, even joining the 2007 search for Rachel. This warns that criminals can hide within communities, urging us to balance trust with vigilance. Second, it shows science and technology's role in upholding justice. YSTR DNA, genealogical analysis, and GED match data turned a hopeless cold case into a solution. This teaches Americans to support forensic science investment, as it's not just a tool, but hope for thousands seeking truth. Third, the Moore family stressed that victims and their kin must be heard. In 2007, police suspected Rachel ran away, but her parents fought back. Their persistence kept the case alive. For society, this reminds us to support grieving families, not rush to label them with assumptions like runaway teen. Finally, Rachel's story delivers a message: justice may be delayed, but it comes. It teaches us to stay patient, persistent, and trust in progress, from technology, community, to the legal system, because sometimes these bring answers we thought were lost. Thank you for joining us in closing this 15-year cold case in Wyoming and finding justice for Rachel Moore. Don't forget to subscribe to follow more shocking true crime stories, and we'll see you in the next video.